This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com. And tonight, as my special guest, we have a man that's wrestled for WWE. He was featured in Beyond the Mat, having a WWE tryout. He's had a pretty long wrestling career. I don't know if he's still involved in wrestling or not. We're going to find that out. It's 90 degrees Fahrenheit where he is. It's only 60 where I am. So that's why he's sweating. Mr. Tony Jones from Beyond the Mat. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
And as I told you when I first saw you, very little has changed about you as far as appearance, considering Beyond the Mat came out in 1999. So I'm going to guess your scenes were probably recorded probably a year or two prior at least.
Yeah, I think Beyond the Mat came out in 1999. We shot our WWE match with Mike Modest and myself at Arco Arena. We shot that in September of 98. And we did a lot of the shooting for All Pro Wrestling in about the same time, about August. So yeah, about that time.
So they went into it in the movie a bit about your career. I highly suggest people go back and watch it. It's one of the best wrestling movies ever made, and definitely for its time, it was the first movie that really showed you behind the curtain because there wasn't any YouTube then. I don't even know if shoot interviews existed. If they did, it would have been by VHS tapes. So it really gave you a glimpse into the wrestling world during a time when wrestling was at its peak. But how did you become involved in the movie to begin with? I'm guessing it was through Roland Alexander.
It was Barry Blaustein. And I always kind of joke about this with, Modest and, some of the other wrestlers. I kind of feel like we really hit the lottery. Barry Blaustein went around the entire country looking for independent talent for the movie. He had a story to tell. So he was looking for independent, talent that he could showcase and, get a WWE tryout and just kind of show what it takes to make it as a professional wrestler. Where do you come from? How do you train? Things like that. So he came to All Pro Wrestling. He interviewed a bunch of the guys, and he ended up picking Mike Modest and myself. So, considering how many different schools he had gone to, and I really feel like we just hit the lottery because there's so much great talent out there, and we just happened to be the two guys that he chose for the movie, and I'm forever grateful because I think it's a very, very good documentary. I became good friends with Barry Blaustein, and I always look back at that moment as one of the greatest moments in my life to be in that film.
Definitely, people still remember it fondly. How long had you been wrestling up to the point where you found out you were going to be in the movie and have this great opportunity of having your WWE tryout showcased in a film that's going to be released internationally?
I was very lucky. I think I'd only been training for I'd only been having matches for about 6 months when Beyond the Mat came around. My very first pro match was in January of 97. And Barry Blaustein was already coming around, looking at talent, figuring on who he wanted by the end of 97. So, he came back with his production crew in 98. And that's when we actually put everything on film. But I knew that I was going to be featured in this movie somewhere towards the end of 97 before my first full year of pro wrestling.
Had you had any talks with WWE before Barry got in touch with you about this tryout?
Have I been in touch with WWE before the Barry
Yeah,
Blaustein
like
came
did
into
they
the
know
picture?
who you were? Had you sent them a tape or anything?
I did not. I was so green. I was so brand new at the time. Mike Modest had been in the business for a while, and they knew who Mike Modest was. It was and I think even in the movie, I think they even said that, oh, I've seen Modest before. This is the first time I've had a chance to see Tony. So no, I that was my first opportunity. I did go backstage. I was there for the for the Monday Night Raw in Fresno, the night that Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mike Tyson did their face to face. So I was there for that, hoping to, possibly get like a tryout or, just be seen, but nothing really became of it at all.
Now here's a question. We know when Jericho did his face to face with Tyson, they were in the back after taking pictures and so forth. Did you see that kind of camaraderie with Austin and Tyson in the back after that taping?
No, not at all. Not at all. They kept them completely apart. I got a chance to say hello to Mike Tyson because Mike Tyson was one of my heroes growing up. And, I saw him off to the side and I went over and introduced myself to him. He was very pleasant. He was very nice, but no, I didn't see any interaction with Mike and Stone Cold Steve Austin at that time. I think they did things a little differently back then.
Yeah, they kept things a little more protected.
Yes.
There's a couple people that have already commented about All Pro Wrestling and those Gym Wars shows where you started, run by the deceased Roland Alexander. Could you talk to us a little bit about what those were like back in the days? Because that was one of the known independent companies back then when the internet was first starting. I always remember hearing about APW Gym Wars.
Yeah, Roland did a really good job of promoting All Pro Wrestling at an early time when the internet was, really just starting to get off the ground. And I remember several times Roland just, basically shoving All Pro Wrestling down everybody's throat, telling everybody that we have the best product and that we're better than ECW, we're better than WCW, we're better than WWE. Our guys work harder, and a lot of that was true. I felt like all the guys, we went out there for very little money, and we just went out there and we worked hard, and I think we put on a good show night after night. Every guy from top to bottom that we had on that card worked very hard. I felt, and it was a great time. And it was really nice doing it inside that garage. It was a small building. Everybody was kind of packed in there. I remember it got to a point where, we had people literally like standing on top of each other trying to watch the show. We used to keep the garage door closed, and it got so packed in there that we had to open up the garage door, and there were people out in the parking lots. And it was really an underground thing that just took off. And after Beyond the Mat, that's when it took on a life of its own.
There's that one scene in Beyond the Mat where there's this wrestler that gets spit on or something and goes after one of the fans. Was that something that was done for the movie, or was that a legit incident that happened at APW?
I've read a lot about that. A lot of people think that was some kind of work for the movie, but I can honestly tell you it was real. And the reason I can tell you it was real was because the guy who spat on Max Justice, the wrestler who got upset and ran up the stairs to attack him, that guy had come with an ex-girlfriend of mine. So at the time, she was my girlfriend. She brought a team of, friends with her. And this guy got a little too carried away, and he was basically cheering for me. So when he saw Max beating on me, when Max walked over, he spit on Max. So Max ran up the stairs, grabbed him, and security kind of pulled Max off. After the show, I went up to Max. I said, "Sorry about that, brother, but that was my friends." And he said, "Oh, Tony, I'm really sorry about doing that, but I don't let anybody spit on me." So the guy had no right spitting on him. I think he took it a little too far, but yeah, it was all real.
Now, at one point in time, the great Khali wrestled in APW. I think he may have actually killed somebody in training. Was that around the same time you were there?
I kind of missed that whole thing. That's when I was touring Japan. I came back from Japan, and and then I had heard that there was an accident, at the school. I don't know much about it. Apparently, I think the kid had some kind of like already pre-existing condition or something. But yeah, that was a horrible scene, and I know Roland took that really hard. And I talked to Roland several times about it, and he just. It's not anything that you ever think is going to happen in the wrestling business. We go in there night after night and we take chances, and a lot of us, we could have our own health issues. We don't know what's going to happen when we hit that mat. So it was just a very unfortunate thing. Yeah, and I know I talked to Kali about it, and he was sorry. It was just a very unfortunate accident.
And I do believe it went to court, and he ended up not having to serve any time over it because I believe it was found that, yeah, what was it, a botched power bomb or something? And it was a combination that the guy didn't know how to land and also the pre-existing injury or something. I
Yeah, I
remember
think.
Bruce Hart testified. Somehow Bruce Hart was brought in to testify.
Oh wow, I don't know what Bruce Hart had to do with it.
He was
But
the expert. He was one of the experts.
oh, gotcha. Yeah, I heard it was a flapjack. I heard it was a flapjack that Brian Ong took, and he kind of over rotated. With Dalit being 7 foot tall. He just kind of over rotated and
Yeah.
landed on his head. That's the story I heard.
Very nice guy. I've had a few interactions with him, and I liked him. He was one of the guys that when I interacted with him, I was like a very low card guy, and he treated me normally. Where you see some of the upper card wrestlers that have a bit of an attitude, but Cali seemed like a regular person.
I want to definitely say this about Kali. Kali really, really showed his friendship to me when my daughter was sick. I had a daughter who was sick with lung cancer, and her favorite wrestler was CM Punk. And I called and CM Punk was kind of like in the generation behind me. So I had never worked against him. I'd never been on the same cards with him, but I knew some of the guys that had, worked with him, wrestled with him. So, I talked to a few guys, and we managed to get her a video from CM Punk, basically wishing her well and hoping that she stays strong. And, she loved that, but, her dream was to actually meet him. So I took her to a WWE show, and Mike Modest also helped me with this. Between Mike Modest and myself, we were able to manage to get a hold of Kali. Kali told me to come backstage, and we got a chance to meet CM Punk. So my daughter got a chance to meet her hero before she passed away, and I will never forget Kali for that, because we felt like, she wasn't going to get a chance to meet him, but Kali pushed the buttons to make it happen. So yes, he is a dear friend and a great guy.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about that. I won't get into that because obviously that's very sad to think about. I didn't realize your daughter had passed away.
Yeah, that was back in 2014. She was a big wrestling fan as well, and I don't know what it was. She always liked CM Punk. From the moment she started liking pro wrestling, she liked CM Punk. So,
Now, as far as the filming of Beyond the Mat, how many days did they film you prior to the tryout? Because I remember seeing footage of you at your family's house. They were talking about how you worked for a cell phone company or something at the time.
Yeah. At the time, I was working for Visa USA, the credit card company. I was an account manager, so I was kind of doing that while I was doing pro wrestling. They shot everything that you saw at my house. They shot that all in just a matter of just a couple of hours. They did that really quick. They asked us to kind of put together a scenario. I mean, there wasn't really a scenario where I would come home and, hi, mom and dad, I'm home, that kind of thing. That didn't really happen. So they wanted to, tell a story. So they were like, they asked us to kind of put this together. So when I walked in, they had followed me up the stairs and showed my dad and showed my mother and put that whole thing together. They shot some footage, which I thought was kind of hokey. I'm so glad they didn't use it. They shot some footage of me running around the block. They wanted me to put on my workout outfit, workout gear, and just kind of run around the block and just show, let's see you train for your WWE tryout. So they never used that footage, and I'm glad they didn't, because I thought it was a little hokey.
And as far as the tryout day itself, obviously at that time, the Attitude Era is at its peak. You're performing in a famous arena in front of the biggest crowd ever, trying out for your dream job. Plus, on top of that, it's part of a international movie. What was the pressure like, and could you go through that day for us? Which, by the way, that's the nicest I've ever seen Jim Cornette represented is his appearance in Beyond the Mat. For whatever reason, he came off as a total babyface.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the greatest days of my life. I could not believe that I was actually wrestling in WWE. I think Mike had probably a couple of matches already with them. So it wasn't his first day at the park, but it was definitely mine. And, my whole life I've been watching pro wrestling and I was a huge fan. So I could not believe that I was actually there to wrestle. So, we had to wait until the building opened. When the building opened, I mean, it was very, very first class. Barry Blaustein was right there waiting for us, escorted us in with his camera crew. So everybody in WWE, when we came walking in, we were known as, those guys that Barry Blaustein is shooting his movie about. So when we came in, we met a lot of the wrestlers. I remember Chris Daniels being there. I think he had a tryout as well. Chris Daniels was there. Just a few other guys from the independents. I think I remember seeing those guys, but I didn't know them that well at that point. But I felt good. I was very surprised. I remember Mike Modest coming up to me in the stands and saying, "Tony, whatever you do, please don't choke out there." And I said, "No," I said, "I think I'll be okay. I've wrestled in front of large crowds and amateur wrestling and, through, collegiate wrestling, things like that." I said, I'm not nervous wrestling in front of large crowds. I think I should be okay." So I remember feeling unusually calm. I think I felt more nervous walking out for Gym Wars than I did for WWE. And I remember when I got into the ring, I didn't get much of a reaction. So I kind of looked at everybody with this real arrogant look. And when I got this real arrogant look, and when I showed this real arrogant look, everybody started to boo. And when everybody started to boo, I said, "Oh, wow, they really can see my face." And I looked over and I saw that they had a close-up on my face on the Titantron. And that's when I got a little bit of jitters because I said, okay, now if I'm nervous, they're going to be able to see it because they have a camera on my face. So, I went and did the match with Mike, and, thankfully everything went according to plan. I think we had a really good match.
Was there an agent assigned for the match like there is today? You'd be given an agent and they'd pretty much choreograph the match with you. I know back in the 90s there was a little bit more freedom.
We pretty much had our own match put together. Mike put it together. And, we just went out there and did our thing. The only person that we really listened to was the ref. The ref would give us our times and, but yeah, it was just really us out there just, doing the match like we would do at a regular show. And yeah, everything went well. No, I don't believe we did have an agent at that time.
And I noticed it showed that you guys were getting a lot of attention. Guys like Mick Foley coming up to you after the match and stuff. I noticed whenever I had WWE matches, the main wrestlers didn't pay any attention to the extras. Do you think that was kind of because the cameras were there and they knew it was part of a movie? And I guess Mick Foley was also in the movie, that maybe there was other reasons for them to kind of give you some advice and stuff?
Yeah, funny story about that was that right after the match was over, Mick Foley walks up to me and shakes my hand and says, "That was a really good match. How'd you feel out there?" And I said, "I felt pretty good." He goes, "You must have been nervous. Is this your first time?" And I said, "Yeah, it was my first time, but I didn't feel too nervous." And he said, "Well, that's good." He goes, "Yeah, no, you did great." I said, "Thank you." So as he's walking out, Barry Blaustein said, "Hey, Mick, that was great. Can you do it again for the camera?" So then Mick looks at Barry and he said, "Well, that was genuine." And he says, "No, that's fine. Can you just do it again for the camera?" So then Mick said, "Okay." So Mick walks out, and then he walks in, and that's when they shot the scene for Beyond the Mat.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
Now, this is a related question. Of course, Jim Ross tells you to work on those upper arms and shoulders in the movie. John's asking if you ended up doing that.
Oh yeah. I trained really hard. I took that very seriously, and I kind of messed up because what I did was when I was getting ready for WWE, I was always a little self-conscious because I had like these little tiny love handles that would bother me in my singlet. So I worked out really hard, trained really hard, almost went back to my college wrestling days, got myself in phenomenal shape, but I think I dropped too much weight. So I remember looking in the mirror and feeling like, oh, I look great, but I just didn't have the size. So when Jim said that, it kind of didn't surprise me. Also at the time, I was so green, I was so new that I had, just this regular workout singlet. And that was the only thing I had at the time. So he also commented on my singlet. He said, get something a little bit more flattering, So yeah, I took that very seriously. And I said, okay. I had Jim Ross, who has done everything in this business, telling me to get a little bigger and to change my outfit. And I did that. After being on the mat, I think I must have gained about 40 pounds. And that's when I started, getting different singlets. I started getting them airbrushed. I actually reached out to Rob Van Dam. I found his email and I asked him, where does he get his singlets airbrushed? And he responded to me and gave me the information on where to get where to get my stuff airbrushed. So I used the same lady to airbrush my singlets that he was using. And then I ended up doing a show with Rob probably about 3 years later for Rick Bassman. And I brought that up and he remembered the situation. He said, wasn't I a cool guy? And I said, yeah, you sure were.
You mentioned Rick Bassman. How have your dealings with him been over the years? I'm surprised he never tried to recruit you into his Ultimate University, although I think you may have been in it at one point.
Yeah, I've done a lot of shows for Rick. I was one of the first NorCal guys to do shows down in Southern California for Rick. I'm actually the only guy that I know of at the time to do shows for XPW and UPW in the same week. Those two were like heavy competitors, and they did not like each other, Rob Black and Rick Bassman. So I actually got myself booked for both shows during the same week, and that was my first time working for Rick Bassman. Was against one of his guys who's no longer with us, Mad Dog Mike Bell. Um, his brother Chris Bell did the Bigger, Stronger, Faster movie. Prescription Thugs. Very very good writer and director. So
And Mike was an enhancement guy for years in WWE, wasn't
famous for the incident where Perry Saturn kind of lost his mind and shot on him in the middle of a match because I guess Mike botched an arm drag, so Perry Saturn just literally just kind of beat him up on national television. Yeah, that it was that Mike Bell. Mike was a very nice guy. He was very friendly to me. It was down there in UPW. I was also my second pro match down with UPW was against John Cena when he was Prototype.
Oh wow! Could you share with us your memories of John Cena? Because I guess you would have run into him quite a bit back in his independent days wrestling for UPW.
Yes, yeah, we were on a lot of the same cards. I can honestly say, and I tell everybody this, John has been nothing but nice to me. Very friendly, very nice in the locker room. I mean, I can't say anything bad about John Cena. John Cena has always been a gentleman from the very beginning, from the moment he started. Very gracious, very humble. At the time, I think he'd only had a handful of matches. I think I was more of a veteran at the time, and he hit me with. At the time, he was using the F5, Brock Lesnar's move, so he was using that. But yeah, no, John Cena was he was a great guy to work against. I worked against Samoa Joe down in UPW. A handful of guys. My relationship with Rick is priceless. I've maintained a very good relationship with Rick through the years, even to this day. Just spoke to him just a few weeks ago.
Why do you think UPW never gets the credit it deserves for producing so many great stars? Even The Miz is from UPW, and as much as people like to bash him, he's had a lot of success.
Yeah, Miz actually came out as one of my managers. It was a match that I had in UPW, and Miz came out. I think it was a match I had against Sylvester Terkay, and Miz came to the ring as my manager. And Miz was very very nice. He was very very good to work with. But yeah, I was just amazed at how far some of the UPW talent has gone in this business. I'm grateful for the experiences that I've had with them, but very proud of my brothers, like Joe and Miz, John Cena, Chris Masters. So many of these guys came from UPW. And sometimes I don't think Rick gets the credit that he deserves for, growing this talent.
Yeah, and Chris Masters still looks great. I posted a video on this channel of Chris wrestling Karrion Kross from earlier this year in PCW that I would suggest people check that out. And Chris is a really nice guy too.
Yes, Chris is a really very nice guy as well. I've had nothing but good experiences with a lot of the boys in the business. All the guys that I've interacted with have been very, very pleasant to work with. And, when I look back on my wrestling career, I look at, I talk to some guys that, a little disgruntled, a little bitter about certain things. I mean, I look back with complete fondness. My son is a huge wrestling fan, and it makes me feel good to know that I'm a part of this fraternity.
Zach B is asking what happened to Mike Modest, the guy that you wrestled in your tryout match. Obviously, he went on to WCW, I think, until it went out of business. Then he kind of disappeared off of the television companies.
I think Mike started doing shows for an organization in Vegas, Future Stars of Wrestling. He worked as a trainer for them for quite some time. And, now he's up in, I think it's up in Trinity, up north in California. Mike's doing well. Mike's, he's a father now. He's a father, and, he's constantly on social media, and Mike's one of my dearest friends. We maintain our friendship. And I think even after the wrestling business, our friendship even got stronger.
Now, for people that don't know, what happened after that tryout? Did you hear back from WWE? What was the rest of your WWE contact for the rest of your professional wrestling career?
We never really heard anything after that. I think there was like some kind of negative stigma on the whole thing because, when the movie came out, I think Vince was upset that he didn't own a piece of it because it became this, the lining on the movie was the film Vince McMahon does not want you to see. So I think Vince probably had some kind of bitterness towards the film. So, I don't know if in some ways it could have hurt us or not, but, I managed to come back and do matches with WWE, I'd say about maybe three to 4 years after Beyond the Mat. But Beyond the Mat helped me a great deal because when I would walk into the locker room, everybody knew me as that Beyond the Mat guy. So that kind of put a label on me that, I am a professional wrestler. People have seen me before. So, everybody, I remember walking up to Paul Heyman backstage at WWE. And, I was a fan of Paul's because, everything he'd done with ECW, and I just respected him. So I walked up to him and I said, hi, Paul, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Tony Jones. And he goes, I know who you are, Tony. And he goes, nice to meet you. So I just kind of felt like, that movie kind of gave us kind of like a quick pass into the wrestling business and legitimized us.
Who were your other WWE matches against? Were any of them on like Heat or Velocity or anything?
Yeah, my matches were Heat and Velocity. I did a tag match against the Basham brothers at the time. I did a match against Raven, who was really a joy to work with. Raven gave me some pointers, told me what he thinks I can do to kind of help my image, and didn't just go out there and have a match with me, but sat down with me, talked to me afterwards. I thought Raven was very cool. Came back later, did a match with Eugene, Nick Dinsmore, who was a total gentleman as well, very nice to work with. Worked a match with Gene Snitsky. So, I had a handful of matches with WWE, and every time I went in there, funny thing was, I think the time that I was in there with Eugene, Vince McMahon comes walking through the hallway, and when he comes walking through, everybody's standing there shaking his hand, greeting him as he's walking through. And Linda McMahon walks over to me and she says, you look familiar to me. And I said, oh, it's very nice to meet you, ma'am. And she said, I never forget a face, and you look very familiar. So I think going back to Beyond the Mat, I think that when she saw me, she remembered me from Beyond the Mat.
Now, a lot of people don't know WCW also had some interest in you after that Beyond the Mat film. Could you tell us how you got in contact with them. And I think you had an experience, not on TV, but some kind of tryout match in front of certain people from the WCW office.
Yeah. Terry Taylor actually put that together for me. Um, he actually sent me down to the power plant, WCW power plant, and that's where I met Adam Pierce. We were in a training camp, and another guy named Rashi Brown. Both guys, very, very good wrestlers, very cool guys. Um, they started to kind of get rough with us because of the Sarge. The Sarge thought, oh, these jabrones, let's kind of, toughen them up a little bit. So they were kind of rough on us. And I remember Terry Taylor coming in later and really like defending us and telling them, I recruited these guys and these guys are here because we're trying to give them jobs. And, I don't want you sitting here trying to break them down and scaring them off because all they're going to do is go to New York. So, Terry Taylor was always nice to me and, defended us. And my experience with the power plant was actually very good. I got a chance to get in the ring with Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff liked the way I threw punches, told me how I could even throw a better punch. I took a shoulder tackle from him. I took a body slam from him. I just couldn't believe I was in the ring with Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. And Terry told me, next what we want to do is we want to get you in the ring and kind of see what you can do in front of some of the other executives. So I went to Reno, Nevada for one of their, I think it was Thunder. I think it was Thunder at the time. And I went to Reno, Nevada, and I got what they call a closed tryout. So I was inside the building with just the wrestlers. And I remember Sid Vicious commenting the most. And I thought that was really cool. I was a fan of Sid Vicious. He was very nice and knew so much about the wrestling business. I don't know if I just prejudged him, but he came off so much different than what I would have expected. He was very articulate. He was very nice, and Tony, try it this way, and do this. I remember looking down and seeing Ric Flair, the Steiner brothers, Terry Taylor, Doug Dillinger. Got a chance to meet Eric Bischoff. So I had a good time doing that as well.
Sid is one of the wrestlers that I get along with the best of the legends, and I think for some reason, because of the heat that he and Arn Anderson have, like Arn Anderson's clique always goes out of their way to try and make Sid look bad, but he's so down to earth and so nice. And I've seen him interact with fans. He'll go over and above for fans. Some fans actually told me a story. They randomly showed up at his house once, and his wife told him to go away, but then Sid came to the door and said, no, I'll sign their autographs. So not many wrestlers would do that.
That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all. I don't know what I was expecting him to be, but I don't know. Maybe I thought I expected him to be a little bit more like gruff and, maybe to himself and don't speak much or something. But I mean, he was very articulate, gave me a lot of pointers, and definitely made me feel good and made me feel like, that they were paying attention and that they wanted to see me do well. So yeah, I had a great time doing that. One of my best experiences was that closed tryout and just being around those legends.
So I guess it just never worked out in the end with WWE and WCW. You were at a time when the talent levels were so high and it was a lot harder to get signed because there was more territories still existing and people that were from the territories still in like good enough shape to be in the top companies. Do you think now you probably would have had more opportunities if you'd been born maybe 20 years later with the current professional wrestling landscape the way it is?
Well, what I see now that's different that we didn't have is social media and the way that you can market yourself. We didn't really have that. And there's so many different ways to get your gear. It's just with the internet, there's just so much more things that you can do to enhance your image and enhance your brand. So that's what I notice most. It's just things have changed so much, and basically because of the internet, it's made it so much easier for the boys, and I'm grateful for that, because you know you always want to see the sport evolve. But you know, when I see so many more places for a lot of these guys to work, there wasn't as many places for us to work at the time. You pretty much had to go to the East Coast to make a name for yourself. I remember the guy that really had that down to a science was Christopher Daniels. I mean, I remember Chris going to Chicago, you know, going to, you know, New York, coming back to California. You know, he did it the right way, you know, to try to get himself known all over the country. Whereas a lot of us kind of maintained ourselves in California. I mean, I did stints in Japan, and you know, I'd been to Chicago a couple of times for tours, but you know, you really had to get yourself all over the place. Now with the internet and YouTube and things like that, you can just wrestle your matches and share them out to the whole world. So you can get yourself seen more so now than you could back at our time. I think social media, like the internet, that's helped the boys the most, I think.
For Japan, was it Pro Wrestling 01 who you worked for?
I never did 01. That was Rick Bassman's group. He had Samoa Joe do 01. I think Tom Howard, some of those guys did 01. I actually did Battle Arts in Japan. Battle Arts is it's kind of like it's kind of like a shoot league. They were like a subdivision of I don't know if you're familiar with Pride Fighting Championships. They were the referee for Pride, Yuji Shimada. He was the head booker for Battle Arts. I think Ken Shamrock. I know Bob Backlund. I think Christopher Daniels as Curry Man. They all did, you know, shots for Battle Arts. But I had done 3 tours with Battle Arts and learned a lot. But it was a very stiff style. You know, I mean, when they kick, they'd lay the kicks in. When you throw a suplex, the guys wouldn't go up for you. You had to kind of shoot the suplex. So it was a harder style to get, you know, to get familiar with, you know, coming from the American style. But I had a good time doing Battle Arts as well.
Did you have any experience with the Japanese Mafia while you were over there?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Did you have any experience with the Japanese Mafia over in Battle Arts? Because we've heard rumors that they were involved with Pride. So if it was the same owners, I don't know if they took you out to any sponsor dinners or anything like that.
You know, they took us out to a dinner. The owner of Battle Arts owned a restaurant, and he shut the whole. I don't know if this was Mafia related. I don't know enough about it, but he took us out after a wrestling show to one of his restaurants. And I think by the time we had gotten into town, it was almost about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember asking one of the boys, I'm like, how can this restaurant be open at 1 o'clock in the morning? He said, oh, he's going to open it up. And I said, well, who's going to serve us? Oh, the workers are going to come and serve us. So he got all the workers out of bed and had them come and serve us at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And we sat there and drank sake and ate sushi until about 4 or 5 in the morning. So I don't know, maybe that was Mafia related.
Well, that's making me hungry. Sushi and sake, I really like. As far as XPW, you mentioned them briefly earlier. They were owned by Rob Black, who apparently was making some really bizarre porns, according to New Jack. Some really disgusting stuff that would even turn his stomach. What was your experience like working for XPW, and were you ever invited to watch a porn like New Jack was?
No. And I think you'll like this story. And I think you and I may have talked about this part before. Rob Black really, you know, had my back in one instance. I remember sitting in the locker room, and Abdullah Butcher is sitting in the locker room, and he was like, hey kid, where are you from? And I said, oh, I'm from California. I'm from here up in San Francisco. And he says, oh, who are you working tonight? And I said, oh, I'm working Tracy Smothers. And he said, oh, I think it'd be a good idea if you bleed tonight. And I said, yeah. I don't see that happening, brother. And he says, how come? And I said, I don't bleed. And he says, why? And I said, I just don't bleed. So then Rob Black comes walking in, and when Rob Black comes walking in, Abby looks over at Rob and he says, hey Rob, this kid says he doesn't bleed. And Rob says, Tony? Oh no, Tony's a wrestler. He's a shooter. He doesn't do all that. So then Abby goes, huh? And then that's when Rob Black said, hey Tony, I don't know if they told you, but you have Tracy Smothers tonight. And I said, yeah. And I said, thank you so much for giving me Tracy's. I can learn a lot from him. And he says, yeah, I think you guys will have a good match. But yeah, that was my Abby story.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even make sense for you to bleed in a Tracy Smothers match where you have no feud, and he's not
Yeah.
known as like a violent wrestler, really.
Yeah, I think he just looked at me and he saw, he saw the forehead with no scars and probably just was like, hey, this kid's forehead is a little too pretty. So I think that was just that. I think that was the purpose in it. Yeah, you're right. It made no sense at all.
Well, that was a good policy to adapt. Although, I mean, the way that I was infected by Abdullah, he cut me with a used blade, so that's even worse than just bleeding with somebody. But I won't go down that trail. He's going to pay eventually. There's a question here from Joshua Long. He says, did you ever have any interactions with Jake the Snake Roberts?
No, I didn't actually. When we premiered Beyond the Mat, Barry Blaustein did a premiere down in Los Angeles, and that was really nice because I remember I kind of got there a little late. So when I got there, security wouldn't let me in. So when security wouldn't let me in, I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I see Barry Blaustein, and Barry says, "Oh no, that's Tony. He's in the movie. Let him in." So they removed the rope, and when they removed the rope, I walked the red carpet as they're taking photographs, so I can walk into this building so we could watch the movie. So that was a big thrill of mine, and I was sitting right next to Jake's daughter, who's also in the movie, and she was very nice. Terry Funk was in the audience as well, sitting about 3 rows in front of me, and at the end of the film, Barry said, I want to announce some people here who are in the audience. Terry Funk, Jake the Snake Roberts' daughter, Tony Jones. And when he said Tony Jones, I remember Terry Funk turning around, looking at me and giving me a thumbs up. And I felt like everything is wonderful if Terry Funk gives me a thumbs up.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for better approval than Terry Funk. In my opinion, the best actor ever from wrestling. He really was good at making people believe. Someone's asking on here, what was the toughest part of the filming of the documentary for you to experience?
The toughest part, I can't really think of anything being like tough. I'd probably say the stuff that we did at APW at the garage because it was a show. So we did that. We actually did a show, and so it was a little chaotic, and you kind of feel like maybe some guys were kind of hamming it up a little bit for the camera. So, but everything. I think some of the stuff there, like, I don't think it made it into the movie, but if you watch like Beyond the Mat trailers, you see guys in the parking lot arguing and fighting, and some guy kind of walks towards the camera and he holds his hands up to kind of say, oh, we don't want you to see this. And, I think all that was kind of made up for the movie. But, everything, my whole experience with the movie and with Barry was very professional. And I can't find anything hard about it. I'm grateful that, both my parents are now, deceased. And I'm always forever grateful that I got a chance to get them both in the movie. My mom and dad are both in the movie, and I think I'm the only one who has his parents in the movie. So I'm grateful for that, and I thank Barry for that.
That is pretty cool. And Maharajar is asking, what are your thoughts on the Spot Fest AEW wrestlers? Don't know if you watch AEW.
My son is a big fan. So sometimes we'll watch it together, and I'm old school. I'm always like, I've turned into that kind of like older guy who's well, back in my day, or they used to do it this way. So I always find myself kind of comparing it to the old days and the wrestlers that I liked when I was growing up. The Ric Flairs, the Gino Hernandez, and I like the Von Erich brothers, and a lot of these guys that just made me believe And I don't know if these guys today make the audience believe like the old time wrestlers did. That's what I wanted to be like when I got into pro wrestling. You know, the wrestling business has just changed so much. I mean, they're better athletes. You know, I definitely say that they're better athletes today than they were back in the day. But a lot of it is, you know, to me, a lot of it's acrobatics, you know, gymnast kind of stuff. You know, I'm still a big fan of the, you know, the chain wrestling and, you know, a little bit of shoot mixed in. You know, I kind of find that a little bit more appealing than just spot, 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 spot. Because to me, it almost looks like 1, 2, 1, 2, like a dance. And I don't think pro wrestling should actually look like that. It should look like a guy is trying to, a guy or girl are trying to, you know, get the upper hand on their opponent. And it shouldn't look like they're working together to put on a show. So that's about that's the criticism I have on it. To me, it looks to me like they're just working together.
Even with the stunts, I mean, we saw Matt Hardy perform a dangerous stunt this weekend, but again, that looked like they were working together to perform a stunt. It didn't look like there was like any real malintent there, and it's unfortunate that he got hurt. I'm glad that he's doing better. There's a good question here from Pete Sanctions asking about your take on Roland Alexander as a promoter and businessman. He never understood how a promoter could sign as a wrestler's agent and get a percentage of their salary if they were signed. Maybe you could shed some light on that. I guess they talked about it a bit in the movie.
Yes. You know, I feel like I've had two relationships with Roland. You know, I had the relationship of when I worked for him, and then the relationship after I stopped working for him, and you know, we would look back on APW. My relationship after I stopped working for him and after I pretty much retired from the business was so much better and more pleasant than when I worked for him. You know, we butt heads quite a bit, and that was part of what you saw in Beyond the Mat. You know, at the time, you know, I think I was making, I don't know, sometimes $20, maybe sometimes nothing, you know, and Roland's whole concept was, you know, you're paying your dues, you know, and that's fine, but you know, you're making a lot of money at this. So, you know, you should be able to share some of that with the rest of the talent, you know, and you know, do a triage, you know. It's like the main event gets this and it gets lower and lower as the card goes, you know. But there were several times that Roland wouldn't pay some of the guys, and I just didn't think that that was fair, you know. And he would always kind of push and say, you know, any sort of bookings that you got outside of pro wrestling, you know, I get my percentage, which he's never, as far as I go, you know, he's never collected on any of that. I have never given him a percentage, nor did he ever try to come after me for it, you know, because I felt, you know, it was bookings that I got myself. He had nothing to do with it. I paid for tuition. I paid tuition to go to the wrestling school, so my obligation to you is complete. You know, I paid you to become a professional wrestler, and you know, my deal with you is done. Now, if you want to book me, you know, you can book me and you pay me like talent. But you know, Roland never enforced, you know, you need to give me a percentage or I won't hire you no more. I mean, I went to Japan. I wrestled 3 tours to Japan. Never paid Roland a cent. When I came back from Japan, he put me right on the APW card. So you know, it's a love-hate relationship. But if you ask me what I really think of Roland Alexander gave me the opportunity to live my dream, and um, I'm grateful for everything that he has done. And you know, I got a chance to make peace with Roland before he passed away, and we've had several conversations late at night, um, just about, you know, things that happened at APW, things that happened between us, um, and I'm grateful that we did that. But Roland, you know, I don't have anything bad to say about Roland. At the time, we were all trying to make it, and we were all trying to get ahead. So, you know, I'm grateful for the opportunity that he gave me. And, you know, one thing that I told Paul Orndorff when I was in the power plant was that when Paul Orndorff saw my punches, he said, "Who taught you how to punch? Where did you go to school?" And at the time, you know, Roland was causing trouble with a lot of people on the internet. So I was a little afraid to say APW. So I said, "Oh, I was trained at a school in California." And Paul Orndorff looks at me and he said, I asked you where you were trained, kid. And I said, I was trained at a school called All Pro Wrestling. And he said, okay, I'm not sure where that is, but you were taught correctly. And I remember getting on the plane in Atlanta, getting ready to board the plane. And I called Roland up and told him I was in Atlanta and I'd just been in the power plant. And I want to thank you, Roland, for teaching me well, or providing the instructors who taught me how to punch and how to take bumps, because I just left the power plant. I didn't make a fool out of myself, and Paul Orndorff thought that I did well. So I did get a chance to tell Roland what I appreciated about him when the time arose.
Now, Gio, I already know the answer to this, but I'll ask this anyways. When you were in wrestling school making $5 a match, working for Roland, what was your budget for eating, working out, and traveling? How were you able to make it work? Obviously, you had a real job, but I'll let you answer this question.
Yeah. It was at the time I was working at Visa, and it was so convenient because Visa is in San Mateo, more like Foster City, which is the first exit off of the San Mateo Bridge. Roland's wrestling school is the first exit off the San Mateo Bridge on the other side going to Hayward. So I would train at night from about, I think it was like 6 to maybe 9 or 10. And then I'd have to be at work at 11 because I worked the graveyard shift. So I couldn't have asked for a better job at the time, nor a better schedule. It worked perfect with me training for professional wrestling. So I made my money working at Visa. So it wasn't a big deal about getting paid for professional wrestling. The only thing that I didn't like was I felt like Roland was kind of taking advantage of the boys, but it wasn't so much that I needed the money because I had money, from my job, and I was paid pretty well. So I was able to, make my car payment and eat and keep my gym membership and do everything that I needed to do based on my job. But, all the stars lined up perfect for me several times in my life, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, looks like we're making some money today. We're going to have some tips to split. Crypto Spasm tipped us $40. Says, would you ever bleed in any type of match? And he also says weed is great for pain management.
Would I bleed? If it was necessary, I mean, I grew up on pro wrestling, and I know that blood is a part of the business. It was just when Abdullah Butcher comes to me and asks me to bleed, in a match against Tracy Smothers in my first match in XPW, and I'd never been asked before. It just didn't make sense to me. But if it made sense and it was it was a part of a storyline, and if I was in a cage match or if I was in some kind of special gimmick match or something, yeah, I'd be open to bleeding.
Now, Justin wants to know if you have any Crash Holly stories.
Crash was a really good friend of mine. We wrestled a lot. A lot of times I would contact him when things would happen for me. If I got matches, lined up in WWE and I didn't want to let too many people know because I didn't want people to, try to sabotage or anything like that, I would call Crash and I would say, hey, I got this going on. What do you think? And, he was always a really good friend. It broke my heart when he passed away. I went to his wake. I believe it was a wake. It was or a memorial. It wasn't the funeral, but it was like a wake, and it really broke my heart to see his daughter up there speaking about him, because I know Crash loved his daughter so much, and to see her up there talking about her daddy was just heartbreaking. Quick story about Crash was we did a small wrestling show. I can't remember for who or where, but we did a small wrestling show, and my son at the time was just starting to like pro wrestling. And I told Crash, I said, would you sign an autograph for my son? And he said, yeah, no problem. And I mean, this is unbelievable. We go looking for a pen. We can't find a pen in the locker room. Nobody had a pen. We go outside. Nobody has a pen. So Crash says, oh, Tony, don't worry about it. I can't sign it for you today, but are you going to be at the show next weekend? And I said, yeah, I'll be there next weekend. He said, well, take this picture and I'll sign it for you next week. And I said, okay, perfect. And then Crash died that week and he never got a chance to sign that picture. So I still have that. I still have that photograph unsigned, and that was really sad. He had no idea that this was, that this was going to happen.
That is a very sad story. Sean Wood is asking if you could share your craziest road story.
Craziest road story. Craziest road story. I think one of the craziest road stories was it's not that crazy, but it's just when you think about the people involved and what we did, it was actually kind of fun when I look back on it. I was getting ready to leave a UPW show, and this is just the when I think of a crazy story, this is just the first thing that comes to mind. Samoa Joe was going to give me a ride to the airport, so we're getting ready to leave, and as we're getting ready to leave, John Cena says, "Would you drop me off at my house?" So Joe says, "Yeah, no problem." So we get in. I remember it was a truck. It was a pickup truck. I think it was a pickup truck, and we get in Joe's pickup truck, and we're driving, and we're driving, and we're driving, and we're driving. And I remember saying, Joe, the John Wayne Airport is closer than this. He goes, "What do you mean, John Wayne? I'm taking you to LAX." And I said, no, I got to go to John Wayne. And Joe just turns right there on the freeway and drives over this like barricade. We go into this ditch. The car just drops in this hole. We pop out of the hole. We jump over onto the other side of the freeway. And now we completely U-turn, and now we're heading to John Wayne. And I thought that was just nuts. And I remember John Cena in the back just screaming like, "You're crazy." But that was kind of like one of the funniest things I can think of just because of who was involved.
and Kaz 58223 is asking how you thought your portrayal was in Beyond the Mat. Did they portray you fairly, or did they play with the footage at all?
I felt like they played fairly with me. I'm happy for the way I was portrayed. I think Barry wanted my story to be kind of like I'm an only child. He's kind of like, he's got this close relationship with his parents. He works a regular job. I thought he may have been a little bit more unfair to Mike, because you see Mike in his bedroom, just waking up, his hair is all messy, cats all over the place. And I think what they wanted with Mike was was working at a furniture store at that time. When Barry originally came by, Mike was working in a mortuary. But when he came back to shoot the footage, Mike had left the mortuary, and now he was working in a furniture store. So they wanted him to actually, well, can you make it seem like you're moving dead bodies? Can you make it seem like you're working in a mortuary? So what you see in Beyond the Mat was a setup of Mike basically looking like he was working for a mortuary when he was actually working for a furniture store at the time. So I felt like I was portrayed pretty fair, but he may have not portrayed everybody. I don't think he did a very good, fair portrayal of Jake Roberts as well. I think Jake Roberts' story was just so grim, and I remember when I saw it, I was just like, "Oh God, this is so sad."
Yeah, and I think there may have been some legal stuff with Jake and them at one point related to that, because I know when I did my shoot interview with Jake, he specifically said he did not want me bringing any of that up. So there might have been some hard feelings. And as we wind it down here, Sean is asking, who is the wildest person you met on the indie circuit?
The wildest person I met on the indie circuit. I don't know. I met some wild people down in XPW. I thought Damian Steele was pretty wild. He was a good friend of mine. We need to reconnect. I thought Damian Steele was pretty wild. I'm not going to go into some of the details, but it was at a time he was at a place in his life, and I'd seen Damian do quite a few things, and became actually better friends after that. But yeah, Damian Steele was pretty wild, and I need to give that guy a call again. We kind of lost touch for a little while, but I considered him a friend, but a wild guy as well.
And the last question, there's a lot more. Maybe we'll have him on again sometime. But there's a fan asking any funny J.R. Benson stories. I don't even know who J.R. Benson is.
I didn't hang out with J.R. Benson that much. He was part of an organization also called Incredibly Strange Wrestling. Um, I know JR had a hand in getting Vic Grimes and Aaron O'Grady seen by WWE, and actually, I think he's responsible. If you really want to get to it, I think he's responsible for them getting their contracts, because I was there the night that they got their tryout match. It was Vic versus Aaron O'Grady, and they had a great match. But I was told that they pretty much already had the contract before that match even happened, just based on what they've seen on video. And they did a match, Falls Count Anywhere, in the parking lot at APW, where I think Crash hit Vic with a car, and that went viral. As far as, and when I say viral, I mean with tapes. This is way before, like, YouTube and all that. So it got onto videotape, and it started getting sent all over the place. And J.R. Benson sent that to Jim Cornette, and Jim Cornette set up the whole tryout for Vic and Aaron O'Grady. So I think J.R. Benson, I think he had a huge part in getting those guys signed. And J.R. Benson's done a lot in the business, and a super nice guy. I've always had nothing but good experiences with JR.
Someone had a last question about your chest. Did you feel any pressure that you might consider doing steroids or something when you had that comment about your arms and chest from JR? Because I know in that time, I think WWE had dropped their steroid testing policy.
Yeah, that was at a time when everybody was using something, to try to, because it was at the time when bodies were very important. People have asked that, do I take it that Jim is basically saying, get on steroids to get bigger. And I kind of always felt like, you don't have to get on steroids to get bigger. You can probably get most of that size, or get a lot of the size without it. Because I mean, there's some guys that you can tell are on steroids, and then there's other guys that are just big and thick. But yeah, the comment kind of does imply that, doesn't it?
And as far as your social media, I know you're on Facebook at Tony Jones. Do you have Twitter or Instagram or anything like that where the fans could follow you?
Yeah. If they reach out to me on Facebook, I plan to get more into Twitter and Instagram. I don't really do it as much. I just kind of do it a little bit just to kind of see what's going on. But I need to do more of Twitter and Instagram. But yeah, you can reach out to me on Facebook, and when I do get that account established, I'll post it on Facebook for all my fans. I really appreciate this opportunity, Hannibal.
Are we going to see your son in the ring? You say he's a big fan. Could there be a second generation?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Are we going to see your son get into the wrestling business? You mentioned he's a big fan.
I've asked him that, and his response to me was, if I do decide to get into pro wrestling, I want to be a high flyer. That's what he told me. He said he wants to be a high flyer. So I said, yeah, if you were to wrestle, you don't have to do like I did. You do your own thing. But I don't think my son is interested in being a pro wrestler. But I support my son in whatever he wants to do. He's a great kid.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made in wrestling, at least now. Whether that's going to go on forever, I don't know. But thanks for coming on with us. To close this off, I never got to hear a promo of yours on Beyond the Mat. If you were having a rematch with Michael Modest tonight, what would you say to him?
Oh, I'd say, I hope you've been training hard, brother, because I've been training hard, and I'm looking great, and I'm ready. And I will be there to beat you the next time that we get into the squared circle. Mike and I have always teased the idea of getting in there one last time, just having like a Beyond the Mat, like blow off. We kind of tease the idea, but I'm kind of serious about it. We should get in there one last time and do this.
Maybe in Great North Wrestling one day. Fans, let us know if you want to see it in the comments. Thank you very much again, Tony. Have a great night.
You